Good morning and welcome to the third installment of the Tennessee Achieves 100,000th student celebration. My name's Chrissy D'Alejandro. I'm with Tennessee Achieves and I'm thrilled to introduce today's panel. Some of my dearest friends are participating on the panel, and so I have to admit I was a bit jealous when I drew the short straw and Graham actually was moderating this panel, but I'm really excited to dig in and hear the perspective from several of our college presidents who've truly been with us, some for the entire journey from Knox Achieves to Tennessee Achieves and Tennessee Promise. I know that you will find this both insightful as well as important, as many of you are thinking about your next steps in the Tennessee Promise or a Promise journey. So I'm going to turn it over to Graham Thomas, who has had like 10 titles since we've been together over the past 11 years, and I can never remember. But I will say this, my partner in crime, I can't imagine a day of doing this work without him. So thankful for Graham and his leadership. Graham, all you.
Great, thanks so much, Chrissy. And I want to thank all of our panelists for being here this morning. I'm going to do just a real quick introduction for everyone. From Chattanooga State, the president, Dr. Rebecca Ashford, who has been with our program since the Knox Achieves days. I think has been a mentor every single year since 2009 when she was the vice president at Motlow State. Dr. Ashford, thanks so much for being here. We also have Dr. Michael Torrence, who is the president at Motlow State, has been a mentor with our program since his time at Bowyer State, since Tennessee Promise was launched in 2015. Excited to have Dr. Torrence. Thanks so much for being here as well. We have Dr. Stumb, who is the president at Cumberland University, also has been a mentor since 2015 when we launched the program. Has been a big help in getting the program up and running in Wilson County. I want to thank Dr. Stumb so much. And finally, Dr. Bowyer, the president at Dyersburg State Community College, who gave us a call in 2011 when we started to grow Knox Achieves into Tennessee Achieves, and has been our champion in rural West Tennessee. And has been a mentor with us since that first year in Dyersburg in 2012. So thank all four of you so much for being here today. Really excited to talk about the impact that Tennessee Achieves and Tennessee Promise are having on your colleges. Dr. Ashford, let's start with you. I've mentioned my favorite point in all of your bios is that you've all been a Tennessee Achieves mentor. A lot of the focus on Tennessee Promise is the financial component, that it made college free, but all of the financial supports to get those headlines. On the flip side of that, we know that we always say kind of the heart of the Tennessee Achieves program is our mentoring program. Why do you think those non-financial supports are so important?
The financial supports are kind of what gets them in the door, I think. That's the lure, it's the draw, you're eliminating the financial barrier. But I think it's the mentoring that keeps them once they walk through the door. And I'm so glad you mentioned, yes, I've been with this program since it started in Knoxville as Knox Achieves. And actually it was my very first year in Tennessee at Motlow State that Knox Achieves started. So my whole Tennessee career has been Knox Achieves, Tennessee Achieves, Tennessee Promise. And so I feel like I've been with it just, in every stage of it. And it's been such an honor to do that. And so every year as a mentor, I have varying levels of success to where all of my students enroll or none of them enroll. And so I often feel like, some years it's very successful for me. I've been a great successful mentor and other years not. But, I'm a first generation college student. I'm the first in my immediate family to go to college. And I understand that when students are in situations like that, they can't just turn to mom or dad to say, well, how do I do this? And so even though each year I don't have all of my students enroll in college for whatever reason, I know that I'm helping somebody and answering those questions that they really don't know where to go for help.
No, I think that's a really probably a shared experience amongst a lot of our mentors across the state and some that are watching today. Some years they all go, some years none of them go using Tennessee Promise, but any favorite memories as a mentor over the last 12 years?
Yeah, there are a couple I'd like to share. One of the early years, first or second year of the program, when we started doing these tnAchieves specific orientations at Pellissippi State. So new student orientation that were specific to students doing tnAchieves. And we had a student panel up on the stage in the Fine Arts Auditorium at Pellissippi. And one of my mentees was on the stage. And so she was sharing her story. And she said, well, if I don't know the answer to something, I just ask Rebecca Ashford. And I was like, I had no idea you never respond to my text messages. And so that helped drive home for me that even if you don't think you are, you're having an impact. And then there was one other student in Knoxville who just really stood out to me because I always remember her because she wanted, when she graduated from college, to have a hair bow business. That was her goal. I want to have a business where I make and sell hair bows. And she always had a lot of questions, but with her, it was almost her mother's situations that stuck out the most to me, because her mother would call me and text me all the time with questions. And it was really gratifying to know that I was helping someone who really didn't know where to go who didn't know where else to go for help.
Rebecca, just a quick question. Michael and I just had a side conference. What's a hair bow?
Yeah, I'm not sure that you'd be in her target market.
Okay.
Don't have the required materials, right, Dr. Stumb?
That's right.
Dr. Ashford, thanks for sharing that. And I think that really goes to the experience of a lot of our mentors, that sometimes the students aren't super responsive and maybe they're not always quick to respond, but those nudges and those text messages and emails really can go a long way and you don't even realize it. So thanks so much for sharing that. Dr. Bowyer, I'll go over to you next. I mentioned when I was doing a brief introduction that when we began to grow outside of Knoxville in 2011, you gave us a call, and Chrissy and I came to Dyer County and met with you and your team. And you've been running a scholarship program, and the college had some seed money, but we went out privately and raised the rest of it. Why was it important to you to bring tnAchieves to Dyersburg?
I think all of us see just lots of wasted talent in our communities. You go to the Kroger store, at the bank, the new teller. They're just recent high school graduates. They're kind of stuck in these low wage jobs. And at the same time, you're meeting employers who need desperately, skilled people. So it was such, and most of them told me they just couldn't go on. They had to work because of the money. So we were trying to have a Dyer County promise. It was kind of fashioned, I think, after Kalamazoo, Michigan, way back in the early 2000s. And so it was a small amount of money, but anyway, it helped some. And when this came along, it was just really a godsend and gave so many people an opportunity. And we're getting so many more in the door that we just couldn't get otherwise. So a huge difference, and sure glad you came.
Yeah, it was. I'll never forget that meeting in the round room there in the back of campus, and then going out for the next few summers and fundraising with you. Got to know Dyersburg really well. You've also served as a mentor with us since 2012, since we came to Dyersburg. Any favorite moments for you as a mentor?
Oh, sure. There's always, and it involves a mother and a mentee also. This young woman's mother was an English language learner, and I had spent about 4 years in Latin America teaching, so my Spanish was so-so. So anyway, she was a little uncertain, I think. She didn't really understand everything that had happened in our meeting. But of course, her daughter could have explained it. But, I assured her that in her own language that, her daughter would do well at Dyersburg State, and it was a great opportunity. And she just seemed so relieved to kind of meet me because I was someone representing the college, and just very happy leaving the meeting. So it was a wonderful moment where kind of emphasizes how important it is to speak to people wherever they are, kind of in some way that they'll understand and you feel like you're being empathetic to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Just having that voice. And, we oftentimes we have mentors from across all all different career paths and business and industry. And we get a lot from our community colleges, and what a great resource for students to have the president, or at the time, the vice president of the college as a mentor. It's got to be a relief knowing they've got someone on campus when they have those questions. Dr. Torrence, we'll go over to you. When Tennessee Promise launched in 2015, Motlow State saw the largest increase in enrollment. If I remember correctly, a 54% increase in enrollment. What did Tennessee Promise mean for the college, and what did it mean for the service area that you serve in Southern Middle Tennessee?
It meant the same things that all three of my colleagues are going to say. We're going to say it all in a different way. It meant access. And I think that that's one of the things that really changes the paradigm for the service area of Motlow State. That's partly rural, partly micro metro. As Dr. Bowyer mentioned, we have incredibly smart, incredibly talented people across all workspaces. So for the high schools that have a barrier, and I think at the time we were talking about the example of the cost of a pair of Michael Jordans, which was roughly $150 to $200, and the specialty ones that cost about $300. That's what was keeping students out of school, because that may have been the additional cost of books as for the last dollar scholarship that was covered, or some other incidentals. So for us particularly, in seeing that growth, I don't know that we were particularly prepared for it the way that it helped us help others, but we moved really swiftly, and the institution did all it could. As a mentor, being able to support the community across socioeconomic lines, and as well as whether you live in a holler or if you live in a house that has a pool in the backyard. What was important was that we know that Tennesseans are very, very adroit at being crafty. And when I mean crafty, I mean that we solve problems, and we do that in a way that prepares us to be successful as employees or entrepreneurs. One of my favorite stories was serving as a mentor and seeing the impact that Tennessee Achieves and Tennessee Promise had on a young man's life that played football, where you may see yourself as one thing, and then you come to find out that all of that hard work and sacrifice that you do playing a sport, that is transferable to the academic space, and being participatory in Dr. Ashford's backyard and such student success. So I ended up having a student in a class while I was teaching English, and he created his own business that was a food delivery business, and he ended up selling that business to, I'll say Grubhub. I think I can give that away without giving his identity away. So what we saw was the impetus of the program being put in place, our community rallying around, and think about all of the communities that have supported, and individuals that have supported these students that didn't know them from Adam, but came to the cause to support Tennessee Achieves, Tennessee Promise, and in our local populations. That's the success that makes me the happiest, to know that someone who may have thought of themselves as a student athlete, but understood that they could be an entrepreneur out of it, and is doing pretty well. I think I need to borrow 50 cents from him every time I see him.
Well, you stole my follow-up question about your favorite moment as a mentor. So it's like you picked up from there too, that it might be coming there. So Dr. I'll ask you, you had me out to one of your faculty and staff in services before the beginning of the semester a year or two ago, and you had some institutional data presented, research presented, that showed that every year since Tennessee Promise's implementation, you've had your largest ever incoming freshman class, that your enrollment is up a pretty large percentage. So what has Tennessee Promise meant for Cumberland University and for the region that you serve?
Yeah, Graham, thank you first off for coming out to our event. We would like to get you back out. You're a great speaker, and appreciated your making time for that. Thank you too for inviting me to be on this panel with these distinguished colleagues. I'm honored to share the stage with the three of you. Tennessee Promise has been tremendous for Cumberland. We started out in the fall of 15. We put our toe in the water with 68 students, and 6 years later, 6 falls later, this current semester, the fall of 20, we have over 800 Tennessee Promise students on our campus this year. And we've seen steady progressive growth each year. And it's been good for us. And we've always been a school that has a lot of first generation college students, and this hadn't changed that. In fact, it may have magnified the percentage a little bit, but it's been a really positive thing for, I think, all of our institutions, including certainly Cumberland.
You've also been a mentor with us since Tennessee Promise launched. Any favorite stories?
You know, yeah, I can empathize with some of my colleagues here. It's been challenging in some cases. Students don't want to return text messages. They don't want to return emails. You call them and it goes to either voicemail or no voicemail hadn't been set up. But I think it just takes persistence. And I've had a couple of students that have responded late in the game and said, yeah, you know, I really wasn't planning to do this. I was going to go to UT. And when they realized that UT wasn't really an option for them, they kind of came back and said, can you tell me more about this Tennessee Achieves and Tennessee Promise? One young man in particular, he at the initial meeting that I had with him, he really wasn't, he was there because his mama was making him be there. He didn't want to be there. He had his heart set on going to a different school. When that didn't work out, I did stay in touch with him. He ended up going not to Cumberland, but he went to Motlow State in Gallatin, Tennessee, and enrolled there as a Tennessee Promise student. And then 2 years later, transferred down to Cumberland, and I see him here on campus now. So it's a great success story for the program.
Yeah, that's awesome. I do want to let our audience know, I've got more questions for our panelists, but if you would like to ask a question of our panelists, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen where you can type in your questions there, and we will do our best to get to those. Next, I have a question. I'm just going to throw it out to the panel. All of you can answer this one. But we've got data that shows that Tennessee Promise students are outpacing their peers in graduation by about 34 percentage points. Why is that? And what is your college doing to support Tennessee Promise students? Let any of you take a stab at that one if you'd like.
I'd love to start if that's okay, Graham.
Sure. Yes, ma'am.
You know, there are several things here, but the first I want to point out is that I truly believe with the Tennessee Promise, Tennessee Achieve students, that because of the supports that they get and the communication they get and this mindset that they all, I think, start to develop as they go through this, working with their mentor, working with the folks at Tennessee Achieves. I think if they don't have it walking in, I think they start to develop this mindset of, I can do this. I belong in college. I have every reason to be here and I can do this. So I think that's a big part of it. But also, you know, I will never forget when Knox Achieves started and meeting with Chrissy in Knoxville, and it was almost this dream come true because I'm like, so you want to help us recruit students and retain them? Wow, where have you been all my career? You know, so the beauty in this program that, you know, started in one county and is statewide and in such a huge program that's had national acclaim. It's this partnership between the school, Tennessee Achieves, the community, and the mentors, and of this wraparound support for these students. Everywhere they turn, they have support, whether it's the staff at the college, the staff at Tennessee Achieves, or the person serving in their mentor as their mentor. So it's sort of a whammy of they're developing this mindset of I can do this, I can succeed, at the same time giving them all the supports that they need. And you know, Chattanooga State, just like all of my colleagues here, we have multiple supports on campus, from advising, mentoring, tutoring. We have all of our high impact practices that we implement in the classroom, early alerts. So we have all of this, but the beauty with Tennessee Promise students is this partnership with Tennessee Achieves. And so I think that's a huge part of this success.
Yeah, I agree with Rebecca, all those points. And I think we developed such early lines of communication with them too. Like right now, we're about to meet our mentees for next year, and we meet their parents sometimes or whoever they're living with. And so all that gets started, as well as all of our admissions people meet them, but at least they meet mentees. And I think another big item is they don't have to work sometimes quite as much as some of our other students work. So they have time to study and to really, get into what they're here for, is to learn. But so many of our students are sometimes working 2 jobs, trying to go to school, take a full load. It's just, it's impossible. And they have children at home. So I think this really allows them to focus on college. So it's been great.
Capacity, and we know that student success is beget on the fact that students can actually connect with a human being. And all of my colleagues are at institutions where they walk the walk and talk the talk. And I know that's backwards. It's usually talk to talk, walk to walk, but they are available, they're accessible. And so I think that also is an example of why students are successful at our institutions, and partly why, not the only reason why, but partly why students have been successful, because they can actually pick up the phone and connect with someone. There's someone at the end of the text. It's not a bot. There's someone at the end of the telephone. It's not a voicemail. And then the biggest thing I think that we can do for students as people who care about education and seeing others successful is that we simply show up. And this is an example. Our leadership shows up, and our communities show up, and our institutions have shown up to support the students. There's nothing more frustrating as an adult when you're trying to get a service and you have to keep calling and keep reaching out and keep calling and reaching out, and it's not as responsive as you would like it to be. Now, nothing's ever perfect, but what I can say about Promise and Achieves is that it's the reinforcement of what we'd like to see in terms of broadening the scope of people on campuses, being able to connect with the students who are seeking to come there. As we all know, people care about you caring about them, and then everything else simply falls in place.
Dr. Stumb, do you have anything you would like to add?
I think everybody's covered it pretty clearly. We certainly do all the things that everybody else described. We care about our students. We offer advising and tutoring and mentoring. And the one thing I guess I would add, though, is that it's particularly challenging right now in light of the coronavirus has exacerbated the difficulties associated with the programs that we provide to keep these students in school. And I know we're all facing those challenges, and I think that it's going to be really interesting. Hopefully we'll pull out of this soon, but a lot of the programs and efforts that we have in place just simply don't work as well. It's hard to do tutoring online without sitting in a room with somebody. It's hard to do a lot of the things that we have done without that face-to-face relationship. So, we're doing our best, but I completely agree with my colleagues.
Graham, could I jump in with one more point?
Go right ahead.
I think it's super important to mention as well that when any of my colleagues are on the call and the folks that they're connected with in the communities and other places, in some way, shape, or form, we've also told our 5 or 10 advisees or mentees that they're enough. And I thought that's another component of this, letting them know that they belong, as Dr. Ashford said, that they can get this done, as Paul and Dr. Bowyer have always also said. And I think that, again, reinforcement, the more that we can be there, and we're not hand-holding, we're simply letting them know you already have the intellectual capacity to be successful and to move your life along the way that you want to move it. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, we've talked a lot about the non-financial supports that we all think are so important, but let's talk about the thing that gets all the headlines, which is the money. And Dr. Stumb, we'll let you go first this time. What is it meant for you? We had a lot of conversations in our office, and I know at the state level about, do we say free college? Because we know that there are still other costs associated with college outside of the scope of Tennessee Promise. But what has it meant for you to be able to offer free college? What does it mean for your region and for the college going culture there?
Yeah, well, we do call it free college here, and you're right. It's not exactly free. There are still some costs, but they're one of my favorite quotes, and I can't tell you who said this. I should look it up, but the quote is that the only thing rising faster than the cost of higher education is the cost of not being educated. And we try to emphasize to these students that education is a credential that can never be taken away from you. And it is truly transformative. I mean, all the studies would suggest that those with an earned college degree over the lifetime have significantly appreciated annual and lifetime earnings. And that's transformative, not just for the person, but for their progeny. And so we try to emphasize that. I try to emphasize that from the very first meeting I have with new mentees, that education is truly transformative. Because again, many of these students have parents, they're first generation college students, like Dr. Ashford said she was. And we found in some cases, we have students who are first generation high school graduates. I mean, their parents didn't even go to high school. And we have in some cases students who have parents that are not only not supportive of them going to college, but they're actually in opposition. They encourage their children not to go to college. And so there's a lot of, it's an uphill battle in a lot of cases, but we found it to be well worth it.
Great. Dr. Torrence, what about you? We mentioned that 54% increase in your enrollment the first year of Tennessee Promise. What does it mean for your region, for your service area to say free college? And how does it change how you've recruited students?
Well, it's meant resources for us as an institution. The success of Tennessee Promise has definitely impacted how we've been able to be funded. And the investment in those funds goes right back into the most important aspect of our institution, the people at it, to make sure that they have access. We're calling something HQ, and that's people who become educated can eradicate and help themselves in terms of hunger, healthcare, and moving away from homelessness. So thinking about those three H's, Promise has definitely been able to help people spin up and move beyond not who they are and where they come from, because that's important to keep your roots, but to create better opportunities to impact, as Paul has said, generational poverty, to move away from that and to create a avenue where you exemplify for your children and your cousins and even some of the adults that are around you, that you can go back to school and you can leverage it for success. The 54%, I'm speechless. I don't really have a phrase or word for that. And that's difficult because I usually have something to say about most things. But I really don't have a phrasing or word about how impactful that's been for the institution. And success begets success. So we owe a lot to this program because it has allowed our enrollment to continue to benefit from Tennessee Promise. So thank you to Chrissy, and thank you to you, Graham, and for coming to campus. It's always a pleasure to come and see you in the morning because you usually bring breakfast too, so I like that. But it's always great to talk to those kids.
Yeah, we like to eat. We've got a really good team that gets in the car and goes and works all the time. Dr. Ashford and Dr. Bowyer, I'll put maybe a slightly different spin on this question for the two of you. Dr. Ashford, when you were at Pellissippi and Dr. Bowyer at Dyersburg State, Tennessee Achieves have been operating for several years before Tennessee Promise. Not in your entire service area, but we were there. So there was a little bit of a free college component already. What was the difference when Governor Haslam introduced the big statewide program and put his name on it? What did that mean for your regions?
Just the statewide marketing made such a huge impact. No governor before that had ever said, the importance of attending a community college or a Tennessee College of Applied Technology. So it was tremendous advertising. I know, just looking back at our numbers, I think this year our graduates, about 60% were debt free. So that's something we really, marketed that, with this Tennessee Promise or the Reconnect, you can leave college debt free, and many of them had friends that were up to their ears in debt from going off, somewhere to a university. And it's like this year where things are so uncertain, we grew 16% on our Tennessee Promise students from last fall. So it's been a really healthy increase. And I think, again, people realize just the benefit of this financial support, what it means to their family and to their future. They're not going to be paying loan payments forever. They'll be able to buy a car and move on and get their university baccalaureate. So it's made a huge difference for our students.
Great.
So I saw a couple of things. When this went statewide, I think I think we all know that there is a misperception about community college education, that it's lesser than, that it's subpar, that it's for, those who cannot. And, I, as a product of a community college, I have an associate's degree from a community college in Florida. And that's how I started my college career. And what I loved one of the many things I loved when Governor Haslam took this statewide, it normalized community college education. It was, maybe this is not my second choice, maybe this is my first choice. Maybe this is a viable option for me. I think it added a degree of legitimacy. And I love that Dr. Bowyer mentioned student loan debt. We have a student loan crisis in the United States where student loan debt has far outpaced credit card debt in the United States, and people are unable to start their lives because they are straddled with student loan debt, often in a career where they can't even, or with a degree where they can't even get a job. So the fact that students can go with a last dollar scholarship, tuition free, at least for 2 years, and look for scholarships and other options and financial aid, or save up cash to pay for those last 2 years if they're transferring to a university, or go to a TCAP for free, or do a 2-year career program and start a career. That is what an amazing way to start your life as a young person. Rather than my whole paycheck goes to pay my student loan debt, my paycheck is mine to control.
Graham, I might add one other thing. Some of us get into a little trouble with debts. I think we were as high as 23.6% of our students with loans. This was back in before Tennessee Promise started. And when you hit 25%, you're really under review by the Department of Education. And it's just, if you live in a poor area where people just don't have any money, it's difficult to recover these loans sometimes. And now we're down to 14.1%. So a lot of it I attribute to Tennessee Promise. Plus, we really got after it in terms of trying to reduce our default rates. But sometimes your default rate is, you can do something about it, but sometimes it's just where you are and the people you're trying to serve and their needs. So this met a huge need that we had.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to turn this over to the audience for their questions here in just a few minutes, but we do have 2 questions that we're ending all of our panels with on our side. So the first question I'm going to ask to everybody, Dr. Ashford, we can start with you. What is something you took away from something you learned in your very first job? And when we say very first job, like for me, my very first job was I umpired Little League baseball games when I was 13 years old. So what is something you learned in that very first job, a lesson you learned that you still use today?
No matter what the job is, work really hard. Show up, work while you're at work, do more than you're asked, take on as many roles as possible. I am sitting here right now as a community college president because in my first job on a college campus, I took on every role I possibly could and never once said, I'll only do it if I get paid more. Because guess what? I gained tons of experience that I would have never had by wearing a dozen hats and basically saying, give me more. And so the payment comes now. So I guess my advice is work hard.
Great. Dr. Bowyer?
It's hard to add to that. Rebecca nailed it, I think. But, you know, I besides my parents, I grew up on a farm. So, you know, work starts early on a farm. But I don't know, after I got away from working for my parents or my grandparents all the time, probably detasseling corn was one of my first jobs. I remember where I earned maybe 75 cents an hour. But it was, you know, it was just, like you say, get there, do the best you can, and enjoy what you're doing. You know, it was all of us young people doing those sorts of things. So we had a great time. Plus, you know, it was important to do I grew up in the Midwest where corn was important. It's, you know, so it was a good start and hard work, long hours, you know, not the best conditions, but anyway, just get out there and do what you can do to improve things.
On our first panel yesterday, we had Governor Haslam and Mike Ragsdale and Randy Boyd, and Randy said that his first job, he was working for his father making $1 an hour. I thought that would be our lowest wage that we heard. But like you maybe got to beat there.
Depends on how old you are, I think.
Dr. Torrence, what about you? First job and something you took away that you still use today?
Okay, so first job, I didn't get suspended for school for doing it, but I found out later that they had to write a rule because I was doing it. So in middle school, I sold candy, now laters and blow pops, and the multicolored necklaces that you could wear, you could eat. And then I figured out that if I pulled the now laters that came in, I think there were 10 in a pack when I was younger. If I sold them as singles, that I could make more money. So I understood the cause and effect of the supply and demand. And sometimes I would, you know, everybody wanted grape, but I would bring the different flavors. And then, you know, the day that I bought grape, I would sell out. So I learned pretty quick the importance of supply and demand. And probably the most important lesson out of that was make sure that you're following the rules or know the rules if you're going to sell candy at school. But the serious thing that I learned was that relationships and connecting the dots are as important as knowing what you're supposed to do and being responsible for what you're responsible for at your place of employment. So selling candy, and I also washed cars simultaneously on Saturdays. So that was a thankless job because I don't think they ever paid me because it was just a bucket. They're supposed to drop the money in it. And I know that I washed more cars than I had change in dollars in that bucket for, but I enjoyed doing it and people kept coming back on Saturdays. So relationships are important.
Dr. Stumb?
Well, first off, I'm probably the oldest one on this call. Actually, Randy Boyd and I are almost exactly the same age, so I can empathize with that $1 an hour. I think the first job I had, I earned $1.25 an hour. So maybe I'm a month, younger than he. But my first job was working in a manufacturing plant. It was a furniture manufacturing plant in downtown Nashville. And to put it in perspective, they don't make furniture anywhere in the U.S. anymore, much less downtown Nashville. But I was working on the finishing line and spray, and they had these spray booths, and I was to wipe off the excess lacquer. That was my job. And what I learned from that job is I was doing it while I was in high school. I was, 14, 15 years old, and it was a summer job. But I thought I was pretty smart, and truthfully, I probably had, as I do now, a much higher opinion of myself than I should have even way back then. But the truth of the matter is, what I learned is that you can learn in every job you're in, and you need to continue to be a lifelong learner. And even when you earn a college degree, I tell our students today, you shouldn't stop learning. You can't stop learning. Even if you have that earned degree or multiple degrees, as most of us on this call have, that you need to continue to learn all along the way. There's always plenty of things out there still to learn.
All right, Dr. Stumb, we'll stay with you. We'll go reverse order this time. And final question from me, and then we're going to turn it over to the audience. Tennessee Achieves has sent 100,000 students to college now as of this fall. So what is your one big piece of advice for our next 100,000 students?
I think my piece of advice for the next 100,000 students is the same piece of advice that I would have given the last 100,000. And that is stay in school, earn that credential, because it can never be taken away from you, and it'll serve you well for the rest of your lives.
Absolutely. Dr. Torrence?
Yeah.
I would say earn while you learn. Why wait to do what you're passionate about post your credential? Do them simultaneously. There's nothing more important than understanding the importance of being able to sacrifice and balance your passions with what you do every day. And I still haven't worked a day in my life because I love every job I've had. So I want students to know the first 100,000 and the next 100,000 to know that they're enough, and people like us believe in them.
Great. Dr. Bowyer. Dr. Bowyer, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, mine would be just never hesitate to ask a question. I mean, we're all here. I think there was a question on chat about how maybe students might be intimidated by presidents. Well, we're just ordinary human beings, and most of us are first generation college students that just were exactly where they were a few years ago. So just never think that your question's too unimportant or too off. Just ask it, because we're ready to help.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Ashford.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on what Dr. Bowyer just said. Yeah, I'm still intimidated by college presidents too. That first gen college student is always back here. But I really encourage students to set a goal, to know where they're headed, and then make sure every decision that they make and every step they take is leading them in that direction. Because success is the accumulation of good, small steps and decisions.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for answering my questions. Chrissy is back now and is going to help us cover some of the audience questions.
Yes, so we have a couple of questions. So some of you saw in the chat, Marlon, shout out to Marlon, longtime friend of Tennessee Achieves. Any fun reactions from students when they find out you are in fact the college president? Are they intimidated? We've heard, shocked, maybe. That didn't sound nice. I didn't mean it like that. Oh, you're the college president?
Unimpressed.
17 and 18-year-olds can be very humbling, I found.
No, I've had the response where
go ahead.
I can't not smile right now because I'm with people I really like and care for. But I get this stoic look from some of my mentees when I say, yeah, I'm the president at Motlow. They just kind of look at me like you don't have anything better to do than be here with us. And like, this is what I do. Like, it's supposed to be about you guys.
I love it. That's so good. Okay, Bertha asks, I think, a great question. She says, as a mentor, how do you encourage students to take advantage of Tennessee Promise? Many of our students, as you know, Promise is not their first choice, for example. So how would you suggest a mentor? Maybe this is a great marketing tool for your institutions. Talk about the value, as Rebecca has talked about, of the community colleges, or students understanding that there is a four-year option that leads right into a bachelor's degree, like at Paul's institution.
I think it depends on the student, but I mean, if they're interested in theater or athletics, or even just getting into some organization, wanting to, to develop their leadership skills, as a freshman, like the president of our Student Government Association, he got here in August and he's already president of SGA, and he's now one of the two finalists for the regent on the THEC board. So, I mean, in how many days it's been since August 24th, he's done all of that at Dyersburg State. Well, if he had gone to UT or University of Memphis or even UT Martin, he would still probably be getting acquainted, around the college. So those opportunities, and of course, if they play athletics, they can be on the team as a freshman and out there competing nationwide, really. So it's and getting exposed to scouts from all over the country. So it's amazing what can happen for students, and we've all watched them, from the day they enter, and then 2 years later, it's just wow how they've developed because they've had so many opportunities in our colleges.
I would add one thing to that, Chrissy, if I may.
Of course.
There's an old expression, I may not get this exactly right, but it goes something like this. It said, if you would be happy for an hour, take a nap. If you would be happy for a day, go fishing. If you would be happy for a month, get married. If you would be happy for a year, win the lottery. But if you would be happy for a lifetime, love your work. And I think that what I try to tell all these mentees is you got to find some kind of career that you're passionate about. And college and universities open up the opportunities for you that just don't exist without a college degree today. There are a whole lot of jobs today that require a college degree that in the past didn't require a college degree. But if you find what you're passionate about and love your work and use a college education to open those doors, then you'll be happy for your whole life.
Chrissy,
I agree. Sad about the marriage part though, right?
Yeah, well, not true in my case. I want to go on record as saying I have a wife.
Yeah, your wife's recording you right
it's
now.
It's an old expression, yeah.
I was going to add that every person has the opportunity to be the architect of their own life, and meeting folks like us and other members of our communities that want to give back, give their time. And it's irrespective of someone's a facilities and maintenance employee, or they just so happen to be the president of an institution. Students need to recognize that the ceiling is the roof. That's one of the examples that I give. And I get this look like, what? The ceiling is the roof? Well, the ceiling and the roof are only going to be as high as you believe that your scaffold goes. So that's what I mean by every student can be the architect of their own pathway, of how successful they will be, of the skills that they learn at the institutions that Tennessee Promise and Achieves gives them access to.
I love that, Michael.
I just want to add, gosh, my colleagues have all said such great things. I talk to people who are having this, torn between my first choice, second choice. I try to listen and find out kind of why is it you want to go to this other place? What is it? Certainly Dr. Bowyer talked about the opportunities students have. It's sort of the, you can be a big fish in a small pond or a small fish in a big pond and be lost. So I love Dr. Boyer's examples, but then also, I'm also listening out for, are they thinking it's less quality? And one reason I ask that is, we often are teaching the same class with the same textbook, sometimes with the same teacher, covering the same material, only with 25 people in the room rather than 200. And I don't think people realize that. There's a great podcast series called Borrowed Future, and it's about going to college debt free. And one of the episodes talked about community college education. And in it, there was a woman who was a community college instructor and a university instructor. She lived in a town, that had both. And she said, I teach the same class, the same content, the same book. On this campus, the students are paying, 3 times per credit hour what the students on the next campus pay. And I don't think people realize that.
I think it's a really great point. I think fit is so important, especially when talking to students. And I think Rebecca brings up a really valid characteristic of any mentor relationship should be listening and really thinking through that fit piece with the student, allowing them to process what they're going through out loud, I think would be a gift to anyone, especially to a 17 and 18-year-old who's making what can be a very life-altering decision. All right, guys, next question is from Eddie. Eddie, also longtime Tennessee Achieves friend. Eddie asks, what challenge do you see ahead for Tennessee Promise in the next 5 years?
That I want to have more of it. And as we've seen the numbers of students that have been served by Tennessee Promise continue to grow and grow and grow, we haven't seen what I think some people expected, and probably what you may pull your hair out about, Chrissy and Graham, every time you get close to a deadline of, will we have enough mentors that want to sacrifice and share their time? And Tennesseans in all communities have rallied around the fact that we know that this is going to be good for our children. I won't even call them students. They're our kids. And we see them at grocery stores and at churches, at ball games. And so if there was going to be a problem, maybe there are going to be so many people taking advantage of this that will actually run out of other human beings to provide them as mentee, to be mentors to those mentees. Policy-wise, in a more broad and important fact. And I'm really serious about what I said, although it may sound like I was joking. I'd like to see more of it. And what I mean by that, the model in which Achieves has created to support students and to be that ladder, to be that bridge to our institutions, to support students prior to them getting on campus and even after them getting there. It speaks to how it's supported our success and our metrics via THEC and performance funding, et cetera, et cetera. So perhaps it ends up being a challenge, not in a bad way, but is this something that should be policy? That we don't have a choice, that this is what you do in this state, and it accesses the opportunity to be even more successful. So I guess that's more than one. So my colleagues sure have something else.
See, one thing I would add, just given how flexible you've been in this past few months with community service, with the start date requirements and the number of hours you have to take, whatever we face in the next 5 years, I think you all are very able to deal with it, whatever it might be. I've just really been impressed with how it's a big organization, a lot of moving parts, and you have really responded in an extraordinary way. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Dr. Bowyer.
I think we all know that higher ed and education in general have changed probably for good. We don't even know the extent to which those changes, will go. We don't know how far they'll go and how wide they'll be, how deep they'll be. So I think the challenge is going to be to continually shift and continually working with the colleges and the trends in higher ed to see, what do we need to change as we move forward? How do we need to alter our practices or rules in order to make sense in the new education world that we all live in post-COVID?
Yeah, I completely
I really
agree.
want to be able to start post-COVID.
Yeah, no, I think that COVID has to dramatically change how we deliver higher education moving forward. I don't think there's any way to escape it. Paul, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, in response to your specific question about what challenges Tennessee Promise and Tennessee Achieves face, I think they're twofold. One is the short-term challenges that you just alluded to associated with the coronavirus. The pandemic has presented each of us a plethora of, I like to call them opportunities, but we've adopted the mantra of agility here at Cumberland because we have to be agile. We have to be able to respond quickly in an agile manner to a lot of unknowns. And then the longer term, I think, challenge for Tennessee Promise is just the uncertainty of what lies in our future. There are uncertainties related even to funding. A lot of the current political candidates have talked about free college tuition for the whole United States and free 4-year college tuition. And I mean, a whole bunch of uncertainties in our future could impact positively or negatively, I think, the future of Tennessee Promise.
And, you know,
the question about, or the statement about being in COVID and then hopefully, yes, Rebecca, I want to get to post-COVID so bad. But this concept of anytime, anywhere, on-demand training and or education, I guess, and this is assumptive, that could be a challenge. How do you prepare for students that may graduate off cycle? And if we offer that type of educational paradigm shift, will that be a way that you can accommodate them, that it's no longer as prescriptive via cohort, but perhaps someone could go through it virtually through the processes that you already have in place that are amazing and supportive? Could they go through it virtually on their own and get started anytime on demand, short courses and things like that? I think that is in our future.
And, you know, in our virtual world now, we really are excluding at least people in this region because of broadband. It's a huge factor for our students and the non-access, and then just the poverty, you know, paying for the, paying the fees for your internet access and all that kind of thing. But really broadband is huge. And, you know, they say it should be like going back to the old REA, the Rural Electrification Administration, that pushed electricity across this country. And besides earning 75 cents an hour, I remember when the lights came on in our house, so living in a really rural part of Western Illinois. So that's true around here. The lights are not on in a lot of houses in Northwest Tennessee for broadband.
Yeah, I think that's something we're going to have to tackle, right, as we continue to think about what's next. Well, I think we're running out of time. I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you to the four of you. I will let Graham close us out, but thanks for always saying mostly yes to my crazy ideas and for always answering my phone calls. I know we lean on our college presidents a lot for a lot of different things, but there would be no 100,000 students without the four of you. So I'm so grateful. Please know that.
Yeah, I just did some real quick math, and I think I came up with, we've got 30 years of Tennessee Achieves mentoring experience on the panel. That'll probably be the only panel where we can say something like that. And your partnership and your leadership as we have implemented Knox Achieves and Tennessee Achieves and ultimately Tennessee Promise has been instrumental in our program's success. And we certainly can't do it without you and your teams and just your willingness, like Chrissy said, to always say yes and let us try our crazy ideas. So thank you so much for being here today, but thank you for always being there when we call and with our crazy ideas. And we appreciate your support and your partnership. And for all of our audience today, thanks for joining us and hope you'll join us and some of our panels the rest of the week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Graham.
Chrissy, you're a dynamo.